Hi everyone, welcome back to another installment of how to divide numbers. So today we're going to look at what I hope will be a useful tool for you to use throughout your mathematical career, and that's dividing by 2. It is quite easy, again, like many of the other parts that we learn about, and I want to show you why that is and how useful it can be. First of all though, let's have a look at divided by 2 itself. I'd like to say it's the same as halving things, which some people find easier to do in their minds. It's the same as saying multiplied by 0.5. You've probably seen that before when you have a 1.5 litre bottle of something. Often you'll see that 0.5 on the end. And then the other one that's really common that you've probably seen before, 50%. When you're talking about a percentage, it's as if you've already divided whatever it is you're talking about into 100 parts, and you've got 50 of those parts, half of them. So that's all that means, 50%. So divided by 2, 1/2, 0.5 and 50% all mean roughly the same thing. We use them in specific ways, but it's helpful to know that that's what we're talking about. Now, I would suggest for you the very first thing you do when you're dividing by 2 is learn some very good handy basic facts. So you'll notice that everything in the 2 times table, for example, is an even number. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12 to start with. Some real basic ones. So when you're dividing by 2, they're very, very easy. It's just half of that. So you'll notice then, oops, that's meant to be divided by. My answers look like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. So it carries on. There's way more than that, obviously. We tend to memorize these basic ones so that the other parts that we do later on are a lot easier. But it does show us one thing. Everything in the 2 times table that can be easily divided by 2 is an even number. That's a very helpful tip. This also works for any other number that is a multiple of 2, so like the 4s and the 6s and the 8s and the 10s. If it's an even number, that's going to be a clue that you can divide it by that. But with 2s, especially easy. There's really only odds and evens. If it's an even number you can get, you can chop it in half very, very easily. If it's not an even number, let's say 5, and we wanted to divide that by 2, whatever's left is only ever going to be 1 or a half. So let's see. We know that 4 divided by 2 is 2, so 5 is just only one more than 4, so it's going to be 2, and then you've got 1 left over and you chop that in half, so it's going to be 2.5. So straight away we do need the decimals, we can't really avoid that, but it's very easy to understand. Now if you were to think about it in a different way, so I had 50 divided by 2, many of you will know that if I chop 50 in half, I'll get 25. You can see the similarity there. It's just that this is 10 times smaller. So, divided by 2, pretty easy so far. Let's see if there are some tips and hints that you can use with various numbers. Switch out the sheet. If your number has a lot of even digits in it, say you had a number like 248 for some reason, and you wanted to divide that by 2, halving it is a very simple, easy thing to do. Just one step at a time. I can say, well, half of 8 is 4, half of 4 is 2, half of 2 is 1, so my answer 124. Numbers like that, super, super easy to chop in half. What we really want to get into then is see if we can find ways to chop numbers that aren't so easy. So I would suggest then that one of the first things you can do to help yourself is learn a bunch of commonly used ones that sort of indicate how the rest of them work. So we've figured out that we can do our basic facts like we learnt before here. Here are some more that are going to be super useful for you all of the time. So you know half of 10 is 5, right? Half of 10 equals 5. What about tens numbers that have an odd tens number, like 30? Well, half of 30, you know it's going to have a 5 in it because you've got a 10. You think of 30 as 20 plus 10 actually, is a nice easy way to do it. You know half of 20 is 10, you know half of 10 is 5. So my answer ends up being 15. Now, that's the way to work it out, but it's so much easier if you can just remember straight off that half of 50 is 25, half of 70 is 35, half of 90 is 45. Just these very basic ones will help you figure it out. So then when you come to something that is half of 5, for example, you just know it's going to be 10 times less, 2.5, half of 7, 3.5, half of 9, 4.5. So knowing these basic facts, memorizing them is going to speed things up for you later on. Now, these are bigger numbers. Does it work for littlies too, like decimals, numbers that are already small? Can I have those? Yes, I can. It's just that your decimal is going to be even smaller again. So if I said half of 1, I know that the answer is 0.5. That's where that 0.5 comes in that we were talking about before. You'll notice that there's a pattern that you can repeat. So if I said half of 3, I know half of 30 is 15. I'll write that down for a start, but it's going to be 10 times smaller. Now, what would happen if this number was half of 0.3? Well, I can just take that and do like we did when we were dividing by 10. If you're not sure what that is, have a look at the video that we've already done on that. So if I say my answer is 1.5 divided by 10, all I really need to do is shift along the number across the decimals and I get 0.15. This makes sense. Half of 0.3, I've only got a tiny amount in the tens and a tiny amount in the hundredths there. So you'll notice there's a similarity. 0.3 chopped in half is 0.15, 3 chopped in half is 1.5, 30 chopped in half is 15. Those digits kind of belong together and you get a sense for it really, really quickly. And that's the power of memorizing some of those things. Now, just pause you there for a second. Okay, the next bit is a fairly important piece of learning. Now, for people who are sort of following through these videos sequentially, this may be the first time you come across this division algorithm technique, but it's handy because what it allows you to do is chop any number in half. So say I had a number that was a bit awkward to have, like 391. None of the numbers are even. It's possible to do it in your head, but it's just that little bit harder. We want to be sure, we want to make sure we get the right number. So we're going to divide by 2. Now you may not have seen this symbol before, but it's a wee bit different from our regular sort of divided by. What we do here is we put the answer on top, and unlike other standard form algorithms, we start with the largest number and work our way to the smallest. And I'll show you how that works in a second. So there's a very simple question that accompanies this strategy. How many times does that number fit in there? Well, it fits in once. And there's a bit left over. In the case when you're dividing by 2, you're either going to have nothing left over, it'll fit in exactly, or you'll have 1. In this case we have 1. Now I'm looking at 19 tens. How many times does 2 fit into 19? We always go slightly under to get our answer, so it would be 18. How many times does 2 fit into 18? 9 times. I've got 1 left over. How many times does 2 fit into 11? Well, the closest is 10, which would be 5 times. And I've still got 1 left over. Now, you could go remainder 1. That would be a simple thing. Or I could say 195 and 1/2. That would also be true. To figure out the decimal, we can carry on. We can say, well, let's put a decimal there. There's old Dennis, our old friend there. Every number after that is going to be less than 1. We'll put a 0 there just to help us figure it out. There's 1 left over. How many times does 2 fit into 10? It fits in 5 times. So my answer is going to be 195.5. So that is a very, very easy way to go. I'll give you a chance to have a go for yourself. Let's just jot down another number so you can have a go. Say you had 427. So write that down for yourself, have a go. We're dividing it by 2. Now the first part's going to be easier. I'll just let you have a go by yourself for a wee while, and I'll come back to you. Okay, so hopefully you paused the video, you had a bit of a go, and hopefully you'll find the strategy is very easy. If you know your doubles and halves, you are sweet. How many times does 2 fit into 4? It fits in exactly 2 times. How many times does 2 fit into 2? It fits in exactly once. So the very first part is super easy. In fact, you could do that in your head. 42 and half is 21. Easy. Nothing left over. How many times does 2 fit into 7? Closest even number under 7 is 6, which means it fits in 3 times. I do have a little bit left over. I've got 1 left over. I could say, well, 2 fits into 10 5 times. So my answer would be 213.5. Could also write that as 213 with a remainder of 1, or 213 and 1/2. All means pretty much the same thing. Now, this is handy because it works for any number at all, even if they're a bit tricky. They've got decimals, they're crunchy ones. Say you had, let's just make it up, 375.99. We're going to chop that in half. It's a fairly complex number. There's lots of odd digits, there's a decimal at the end. The strategy still works though. Now I know this is odd, so I'm going to put in a little placeholder down here. I'll just bring it up so you can see better. I'm going to put a placeholder there. I don't need to. I could imagine as many as I like, but in this case I'm just going to put it there because I know I'm going to end up with that extra bit. And I've managed to put my other pen down somewhere. Here it is. So, going through, pause, have a go for yourself, see what you come up with. Okay, so hopefully you've had a chance to have a go. How many times does 2 fit into 3? Once, with 1 left over. 2 fits into 17. 16 is the closest. That's 8 times with 1 left over. 2 fits into 15. 14 is the closest. 7 times with 1 left over. Don't forget Dennis. Really important. The number doesn't make sense without the decimal point. 2 fits into 19, well 18 is the closest, again as we just figured out with that other one that we did just before. So that fits in 9 times with 1 left over. Same maths again, I don't have to do it again. Got 1 left over, 2 fits into 10 5 times. So my number, which was quite complex to be fair, 375.99, half of that is 187.995. Well, hopefully that helps you guys a little bit. I'm kind of rushing because I don't want to spend too long talking, but try some out for yourself, and if you feel the need, what you can do is double check on your calculator later. I think that's a tremendous tool. I don't usually encourage using calculators, but it's a helpful tool if you're unsure when you're starting until you build your confidence, and then you don't need it anymore, you're sweet. Okay guys, thanks for listening. Hope you enjoyed dividing by 2.